So friends, esteemed colleagues, and distinguished guests from around the world, on behalf of myself and Safe Social, Marx, Wang, and For You page, and of course the United Nations, and anyone watching, I extend a very warm welcome to all of you here today. My name is Bailey Parnell, and I'm the founder and CEO of SkillsCamp, a soft skills development company, as well as a nonprofit called Safe Social. I also research digital well-being and AI. Now, I started researching social media's impact on mental health over a decade ago, and that kind of expanded over the years to include the emergence of the field of digital well-being in general, which was great. But I also saw, as I know many of you did, the harms of this technology spread really rampantly in youth communities. I just actually heard one youth leader yesterday say it just like this: "We're pissed that we've been experimented on and exploited our whole lives." And at the very same time, I have also seen the beauty that comes from social media to connect young people and to empower them with information and resources and communities for marginalized peoples. But now fast forward, and I'm currently looking into how generative AI could help us learn human skills. And yet here is this new emergent technology that has great capacity to affect every aspect of our human condition and well-being, but have we learned our lesson? So today, you're going to hear from people who have affected my own thinking on this stuff over the years, who have inspired me to continue action. And our panelists will begin by discussing the rapidly growing influence of generative AI in the realm of teen social media use and how positive psychology connects to all of this. We'll move on to share insights into digital well-being, explore the barriers in interdisciplinary research, and we'll ponder the ethical considerations surrounding emerging technology. This is about learning, yes, but this is also about action. So at the end of our time, we'll aim to deliver an actionable agenda for how best to educate and empower youth in the digital age, regardless of when you are watching this. Today, we will explore diverse perspectives that contribute to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, specifically Goal 3, which is centered on good health and well-being, Goal 4, which targets quality education, and moreover, our conversations will align with the UN Global Digital Compact and Local 2030 initiatives that aim to make technology ethical, inclusive, and community-driven. And what is truly in line with the mission of the United Nations, we have folks representing countries from around the world. So I am from Canada myself. We have Spain, Hong Kong, US, Saudi Arabia for a truly international perspective. So it is both an honor and a privilege to moderate this session that focuses on the pressing need for comprehensive education and the empowerment of youth as change makers for well-being and health. So as we gather here at this UN Science Summit with both virtual and in-person events, allow us to express our deepest gratitude for each one of you watching and here today, because your presence signifies not just your interest, but also your commitment to fostering a future where our youth are educated, empowered, and engaged in creating sustainable, healthy communities. So thank you, and let's just begin this enriching journey. So my first question will be for everyone, and I'll guide us through. Could each of you briefly share what you do in this world of digital well-being, and also why anyone watching should care? Not from a justify your life kind of perspective, but from the lens that there's going to be some viewers here who have never been a part of this conversation before and might actually not understand how our work affects their daily life. So Marx, why don't we begin with you?
Yeah, sure. Hi everyone. My name is Marx. I'm a PhD student at the University of Washington, studying digital well-being and the intersection between data and positive psychology. The work I do is mostly in integrating. So digital well-being is a very emerging concept in the field of many fields across social science, humanities, and this varies from cultural studies, HCI, human computer interactions, philosophy, communication science, and so on. And the work that I do is integrating many different fields into a framework to produce a way how we can think systematically across different fields, the impact of digital well-being, the impact of that over our lives, and the impact of technology, how it gets translated into our lives, into the everyday corner of so on. And specifically, I work on two segments. One is how digital social media and how that impacts the cognitive development of young people, and how we can change technology to improve or to improve the performance of young people and so on. And another aspect is HCI, which is the dark patterns persuasive design and so on. So what we do is we do a lot of participatory design with young people, with teenagers, to imagine, for instance, how the future technology, how that's going to look like, and how we can produce the according design guideline for researchers, for practitioners to design technology accordingly. But yeah.
No small feat. No big deal. Just studying how all of our brains have been affected. Gemma, Dr. Gemma, how about you? What are you up to these days?
So I lead an organization called Eticas Tech. And what we do is we audit AI systems. We inspect the AI around us to ensure that it works well. And what we've found so far, and we've been doing this for quite a long time now, is that most systems around us work really poorly. So we keep being told that AI is better than humans. When we actually put it to the test, the decisions being made by AI and the processes being created by AI are suboptimal to say the least. They're not making good decisions. They're definitely not making better decisions than humans. There's no transparency about how those decisions are made. So oftentimes we know that it's a bad decision, but we don't know why. So what we do is audit those systems. Sometimes we are hired by developers and implementers of AI systems, and then we work with them to identify what is happening and why it's happening. And when we cannot do that, we get together with civil society to reverse engineer these systems and kind of open the black box. And the great news is that what we found in our work is that there's no black box. We can always find out how a system works. Which is really encouraging. We just need more hands and eyes and hearts working in this space, and hopefully address not only bad decisions about, whether you are given a job or a mortgage, but also bad decisions in terms of what information is given to you, what options do you have when you receive that information, how do you position yourselves, how are you stereotyped oftentimes by this data, what kind of image of yourself are you getting from those systems, not just social media, but anything that relates to you, like the ads that you get. There's so much input that we get through our computers that is decided by an algorithm in ways that may be impacting on how we see ourselves, how we position ourselves before others. And again, it's beyond social media. It's not just social media. The kind of ads that you get also make you think about the options that you have. The kind of decisions that you get when you go to a bank or to find a job are also impacting how you position yourself in the world. So in the end, we see a continuum of impacting on your self-worth and self-image in relationship to others that goes way beyond social media, even though it also includes social media. So the psychological aspect on how this malfunctioning of AI impacts on people and not just processes is huge.
Yeah, I think people don't even realize that it affects like how your mortgage might come out. So I'm looking forward to seeing more of your work. My friend Maddie, tell us about what you're doing in this world and why our viewers here should care.
Hi everyone. My name is Maddie Freeman. I'm currently a senior at CU Boulder in Boulder, Colorado, studying business management and entrepreneurship. And I started my nonprofit organization, NoSo November, in 2020. NoSo November stands for No Social Media November. So it's a month-long detox movement and educational program that works with schools and young people to teach them about the negative effects of social media's addictive design and how it can impact mental health. And then we challenge people to take that 1 month detox and really focus on their relationships and their healthy coping mechanisms during the month. So that's what I've been working on for the last 3 years. And I've had a lot of awesome support from organizations like Look Up, and I've been able to connect to Yoelle here. We got to film a documentary together, not together. She filmed a documentary and I got to be in it, which she will share more about for sure. But the work has been awesome, and it stems from definitely a deep place for me. I started doing a lot of suicide prevention work in my local community in Littleton after losing a lot of friends to suicide, and I was just really feeling like our educational systems were not supportive and didn't have nearly enough mental health support or resources that they needed to, especially when deaths were occurring over and over and over again. So I kind of made a petition and started working with the school district that I went to, worked with them closely, almost as like a consultant to come up with youth-focused mental health resources. And that's when NoSo November was born, after I watched The Social Dilemma. So it's been really great. I've been trying to expand and work with as many schools as I can across the US. And we're looking at implementing kind of a global marketing strategy to try to make No Social Media November like synonymous with like a dry January or like No Shave November. So that's what I've been working on, and I'm really excited to hear all the diverse perspectives here. So thank you all for being here.
Yeah, do you know what, Maddie? I have both. On one side, I think that NoSo November would impact people, 10 times as much as not shaving. And at the same time, I actually heard a really sad, heartbreaking stat just yesterday that under 10, the leading cause of death, even over cancer and all the others combined in the US, is now taking your own life. And it has a huge correlation with social media. So your work is I just got shivers. It's more necessary than ever. So thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. Justin Thomas.
Okay, well, listen, thank you so much, first of all, for the invite. It really is an honor and a pleasure. I think it's a big question, even just to kick me off, because that part of the question about why is this important, like and part of me, I want to get straight to that bit, but I'm going to hold myself back and at least introduce myself first. So, Justin Thomas. I was previously a professor of psychology in academia, journal articles, research, teaching courses. And I guess from that perspective, I saw firsthand, I saw social media, I saw cyberbullying, I saw the impact that these digital technologies, the positive impact, I never want to lose sight of that. I saw the positive impact, but also this insidious, creeping, negative, destructive impact that some people were affected by. So I saw that firsthand. That crept into my research. Yeah, and again, it feels quite distant. Research can sometimes feel quite distant. You look at these things, you publish articles, and that can sometimes be the end of the story. That's still very useful. You're contributing to what we know about these things, the evidence base, etc. But I got involved with an organization, and this is where I am now. There's an organization that was far more active. So the organization was the King Abdulaziz Center for World Culture, short name ITHRA, which is based in Saudi Arabia. And they had what was called a digital wellbeing program. Short name for that was THINK. And their objective was quite simple. It was this idea of, it was global in scope, and it was the idea of to spark a global movement that would lead to a more healthier relationship, a balanced and more healthier relationship with these existent and emerging technologies that have become so interwoven with every single aspect of our life. And ultimately, what the aim for is to look at ways in which we can be with these technologies that, whereby we derive the many benefits from them, but at the same time, we kind of, we safeguard the cognitive development of our children. We safeguard, the sense of self, the kind of, the damaging impacts that it can have on kind of self-worth, self-perceptions. So this idea of achieving a balance, and that's the work of the organization I represent today, which is ITHRA Think. And our vision is global, and the different work streams we have are all driven by research. I'm part of the research stream, but I work across. So we look at research, we look at intervention, popular culture, advocacy, and education. So we have a kind of a broad global mandate, and really, I think one of the things that I'm really excited to be here today is that we know there's lots of people working in this space, and it will be far more effective, as we start to join forces and work together towards these common goals. So
yeah, I couldn't agree more.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Now for Yoelle. Tell us about what you've got going on these days.
Hello, my name is Yoelle. I'm a senior at the Washington University in St. Louis, also based right now in New York City. So my work really is starting a documentary titled Our Subscription to Addiction. So it essentially captures my own story of phone addiction. I got my social media maybe in 6th grade, but by junior year of high school, I deleted it entirely. I thought Instagram, Snapchat, those platforms weren't really benefiting me anymore. But I found that my addiction didn't really end there. And that's what frustrated me the most, is I felt I was still addicted to YouTube. I was still addicted to my Gmail, which is so silly, but like that was just the reality, because I was refreshing my Gmail like I used to my Instagram likes. And it made me realize that the problem stemmed so much deeper, and I spent so much time blaming myself for this problem until I looked around and realized that if it's not just me, but a whole generation of people is addicted, is it really our fault, or is it the fault of those who designed it to be that way? So I did a little bit more digging, and I realized that these platforms are psychologically designed to be addictive. Like Maddie, I watched The Social Dilemma and it blew my mind completely. But at the same time, I realized that I still felt hopeless, even though I knew why I was addictive. I didn't really feel that I could make much of a solution, especially being a young person. I thought maybe one day I could intern for The Social Dilemma. That would be cool. But realistically, I wouldn't be able to do anything until I was an expert. Until I met a girl on my college campus who showed me that I actually am an expert. I've lived my whole life on my phone, and that gives me enough knowledge and experience to realize I can do something right now. So right around that time in college, just about a year and a half ago, I had the idea for this documentary where I could finally capture my own story. And as a filmmaker, I thought by expressing my own experience, I would be able to heal it, because by showing it to everyone, this addiction would no longer control me. And so that was kind of the first half of the documentary. And when I looked around, I realized that there was actually a whole generation of young people that were actually finding solutions to this problem, that it wasn't just one person that I met on my college campus. It was 70 plus youth digital well-being activists that I didn't even realize was this growing movement. And I thought, oh my God, I have to capture this. So that's when I had the idea of interviewing as many young people as I possibly could, essentially to show the rest of my generation that there are people that are finding solutions, that your story doesn't have to end when you were addicted. It can continue into what you turn that story into and what happens after that. And so I've had the privilege of working with Maddie. She's a good friend of mine now. And just last summer, I flew her out and we filmed her in my living room. So it's been an honor. And I think why people should care is because, unfortunately, this is a problem that affects almost all of us. And that's the reality of the matter. And a lot of people don't even realize it's a problem. And if it's not for some, that's okay. But for those that, our film really tries to help those who are in our generation that do feel like they're struggling and do want to find some hope for a solution, and help inspire them to realize that there's actually a lot that they can do right now and they don't have to wait. So thank you for having me.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, just there, you just basically said the title of the whole session, right? So empowering youth. There's no way we couldn't have you here. Now, over this time that we have together, I've obviously got some special questions for each of you, but there's a lot of overlap in what we do here. So if after Marx is done answering, if you feel like you've got something to offer from your perspective, I think that would make it an even better discussion for us. And of course, Yoelle, you said this affects everyone. And of course it affects everyone, because we all have a brain, which means we all have psychology, and brain psychology in general spans kind of over what all of the things that all of us do. It plays some role in it. So Marx, my first question is for you. Could you elaborate on the role of positive psychology in shaping healthier digital habits among teens? And it's possible people here don't even know what positive psychology is.
Yeah, of course. So positive psychology itself is so it's very interesting. So first of all, positive psychology is it's a fairly new concept, and it's started in about 20 years or so. The most famous model is the PERMA model, dealing with positive emotions, engagement, relationships, meaning, accomplishment. And it's very interesting if you look into positive psychology, like if you go into so the majority of research that we're seeing today regarding all the digital well-being are either reducing harm or increase in well-being, or a net increase in well-being. A lot of the majority of participants in many of digital well-being studies often report that we should balance the cost and benefit of digital technology use, like more of a net increase sort of perspective. But there's a significant segment that are looking to start to look into the positive psychology angle, which is there's a lot of participant research started calling for digital well-being to move beyond just reducing the harm of technology. So that's one aspect. And then at the same time, if you go onto Instagram and the mission page of the Instagram or Snapchat and so on, you see when they describe their mission, they're describing from a positive psychology angle. Specifically, Instagram says that the goal is to bring people closer to people and bring people closer to the things they love. But at the same time, if you compare that to the work that Instagram are doing, they're focusing on more of a reducing harm, but specifically on well-being, they focus more on the reducing harm. The 3 of their 4 projects regarding well-being is tools for limiting time, improving safety, for managing time and safety of children. And this is very sort of a universal across most of the big tech company, same for Google as well. So that's one of the interesting direction. So to directly answer the question exactly what roles positive psychology plays in teens, in the habit of teens, you have to look at from the angle of directly we don't see much of a positive psychology because we haven't seen much of the link. But if you're looking from the harm perspective, a scoping review fairly recently shows that the most direct impact we can see is 2. One is long duration of screen-based media consumption is related to less efficient cognitive control in adolescence, specifically in the area of DMN, which is the default mode network, and the sensory executive network. So that's one of the key things. Another key things is that online activities, when people use a lot of phones, especially for young people, we see that we see a strong connection between strong rewards to the brain versus the repeated screen time. Arguments a tendency to seek short-term gratifications. So that's the 2 biggest thing. And then we also see similar impacts in terms of executive control and when on social media there is peer exclusion causes in disorder in the emotional regulation aspect. So that's more of the lower level of how digital well-being or how technology is impacting our adolescents' brain on the lower level. At the higher level, what we see is the technology is designed to be more and more accessible, to be more the addictive is one aspect of reading it, but we can also see technology is being designed to be more accessible, right? People have different, like you can scroll at the small design to make you easy to scroll, small design to make you easy to view content at 1 finger instead of 2 fingers and so on. So broader aspect of this accessible technology also leads to a sort of like loss of agency and loss of self-efficacy, and that's it sort of ties back to the positive psychology aspect. What we see is meaning when you have reduced concept of agency, when you have reduced engagement from yourself, then we see drops in across pretty much every aspect of well-being, from positive emotions to engagement to meaning, and that's more of a broader picture. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's more that it seems like the world of tech and social media has used positive psychology extremely effectively, but for the negative, to keep people addicted. And that actually relates to my question with Gemma, because we hear a lot about how algorithms use psychology, dare I say, against people, or in ways that are not good for their long-term well-being, such as keeping them addicted or keeping them just buying more. We call it the race to the bottom of the brainstem, and that was reflected in the social dilemma that's been brought up a couple of times already. But I feel that you've stepped up to make things more ethical for youth and for everyone, the algorithms that are behind often what we see on the front end of social media. And so really, what are some of the ways that you've found algorithms to be first unethical, because we don't know as much as you know here, and then what considerations do you make to make them ethical? What goes into this?
So like the first challenge for us was to understand why social media was being so detrimental to people's mental health, and all the complaints that there were about, the rabbit holes, or people ending up in extreme conversations when they were just looking for something that was not extreme at all. And the first thing that we had to understand was that social media companies are not using psychology to manipulate us or get us trapped in rabbit holes intentionally. And that is really important to understand. There's no company, no CEO that is like, let's fuck up all teenagers in the world. You know, that doesn't happen. This is the product of business decisions that have not taken into account how those business decisions impact on people's mental health and well-being. So basically what an algorithm does, and I think it's really important to understand what we talk about when we talk about AI. So what an algorithm does is take performance metrics of a video or a piece of content at scale. So what a social media outlet does is see, so that this video has been shown to all these people, and it's been shown before this other video and after this other video, or before this other piece of content and after that other piece of content. And it measures when have people visualized that video or piece of content the most, because these companies optimize for engagement. They want you to stay on the platform for as long as possible, because the length of your engagement will determine how many ads they can serve you. So how much money they make out of your using the platform or the service. So they optimize for time of engagement. They want you to be there for a long, long time. So what they do is they take the data on what are the videos, what is the content that is making people stay. And what happens is that psychologically, if we are shown bland content, we get bored. But if we are shown extreme content, we stay hooked up. And so algorithms don't see that it's extreme content. What they see is that people are staying for that content. And that's what they've been trained to optimize. If people watch this content and after this content they want more, then we want to show this content to a lot of people. But algorithms are blind. They're just mathematical functions. All they know is how to optimize a function, which is if the video or the content is associated with a lot of engagement, we want to show it to as many people as possible. And the problem here is that companies have not been asked to make sure that the content that they choose to reproduce is not harmful. Because for them, it's only about the engagement metrics, because that's what brings in the money. At the end of the day, these companies make money through ads. They're advertising and marketing companies. So we need to understand, follow the money. That's where it's at. And so our mental well-being and mental health is the consequence of those business decisions. The things that in most other areas of our lives and market sectors, you cannot follow your business needs if they harm people. Like, it may be cheaper to build a skyscraper with cheap materials, but you're not allowed to, because the skyscraper is going to collapse and kill people. So, there's mechanisms to ensure that if you want to build a skyscraper, you have to get permits and show that you are building with the right materials, because, regulation protects us from having a skyscraper fall upon us. With social media and the tech sector, that hasn't happened. So we don't have that regulation. And so we've allowed them to build skyscrapers that crumble on people. We've allowed them to build systems that optimize for engagement in ways that harm our mental health. And that is unacceptable. It's unacceptable because we haven't given that privilege to any other sector of the economy. So why, allow these big tech moguls to do things that we would not allow other companies to do? I think that's unfair from a competition perspective. But also it's showing to have really, really bad impacts on individuals and on society and on groups. Because it's not just your mental health, but also what we find is that the mental health of specific groups is worse affected. So if you're a woman, you're more vulnerable. If you're not white, you're more vulnerable. If you come from a non-mainstream background, you're more vulnerable. So it's not impacting the mental health of people across the board in an equal way. It is impacting, again, way worse on those that are already more vulnerable. And again, that is unacceptable. So now that we know what is happening, what we need to do is demand that these companies don't optimize their business models in ways that harm our mental health. And that may mean spending more money on this. Like, again, a skyscraper that doesn't fall is more expensive than a skyscraper that will fall on people. But we would never think of allowing a skyscraper to be built unless the materials were good enough. So right now, the scaffolding of social media is very, very problematic. And unless we get them to spend more money on understanding what are the building blocks of safe social media, we should not allow them to put more products out there. And I think that's the fight that we need to have, is that one. And again, it's nothing new, and it's nothing special. We've been doing that forever with every sector of the economy. It's time to ask for big tech to put themselves under the scrutiny of regulation, the population, and have to be more transparent and invest more in making sure that the systems don't produce harm. But again, social media is just one part of the equation, and a really important one. But our mental health and perception of self in relation to others is also being impacted by other things. Like a couple of years ago, while we're in the midst of the pandemic, in the UK, they decided to not have the A-levels exam, like the exam that decides whether you get to university. In most of Europe, you have one exam that everyone takes, and that determines which universities you get into. And because we couldn't have it face-to-face, they substituted the exam by an algorithm. And the algorithm would take your grades from the past and get to an average grade. But then they added some rules inside the algorithm to give you a bit more of a grade or a bit less, to ensure that the people that got a grade over a certain number had a place in university. So it was like a matching algorithm that ensured that if you got over a certain grade, you would get a place in university. What happened when that was released is that people could calculate their average grade, and they could see whether the system had given them more points or less points. And people started getting to social media. Why is my average below what I can calculate out of my average? Well, what have you done? And why have I been discriminated against? Like, why is my average lower when someone that I knew has had their average increased? And what we saw when people took to social media to expose this was that most people complaining about reduced grades were people from low-income backgrounds, non-white backgrounds. Mm-hmm. And so examining and auditing how the algorithm worked, we found that one of the rules that had been incorporated into the algorithm was that if you came from a school where the ratio of professor versus students was lower, you were given more points. But of course, who goes to schools with less students per class? Those are the elite schools. So, an educational rule was actually a proxy for class and socioeconomic background. But again, whether you get to university or not is a huge thing about, your life chances, how you perceive yourself as successful or able and deserving of achievement is regulated by that. And so having a mathematical function that is wrong determine that is really, really problematic. So what we see is that the issues about mental health positioning in the world are not limited to social media. And so the same demands that we put on social media, we need to start putting on everything: banks, universities, hiring processes. Like, we need to make sure that people's algorithmic chances are not impacting on those that are already traditionally excluded from many, many opportunities already. So a lot of work needs to be done to kind of make this wrong right.
Which I think you've given a great example, first of all, of how people don't realize this might be affecting their everyday life. Even if you don't work in tech, you could just be a student trying to go to university or trying to be allotted in healthcare. Who's going to get the liver first? Like, who needs it more? And suddenly the AI or the algorithm is deciding that for us instead of a human. And, with social media, the whole enrage and engage strategy, if I could. But I like the way you talk about the algorithm, actually. Almost in a way, it sounds like a kid or something. It sounds like the algorithm's doing what we told it to do. Like, you can't be mad at the algorithm. It is seeing that a lot of people are watching this and it's delivering you more. It should almost be like, good job, kid. You did the thing that we asked you to do. But exactly. I see it this way. And then you're saying, no, we got to go to who's asking. And you also said something there that was really interesting about, we need to make, like, these companies are inflicting harm and maybe they did not intend it. Honestly, who cares? If you put out a bottle of pop and it has unintended harms and starts killing people and starts making them do funny things, consumer protections would say, wait a sec, have you passed this, that, and the other regulation? And so I actually feel like, I'd love to know what you think about this, and Justin, anyone else who's got ties to the regulation, but perhaps consumer regulations would be a more successful entry into regulating social media and these big tech than, say, just content moderation. Like, what do you think about that?
Totally. Like I use an example. It may seem like very simple, but I think it works. Like, think of a yogurt. You go to the supermarket and you buy a yogurt, right? For you to be able to buy that yogurt, the regulation and controls begin with the cow. Where the cow is, how the cow was born and is raised, what the cow eats, how the milk is extracted. Once the milk is extracted, how it's kept, the temperature, how it's turned into yogurt, how it goes to the supermarket, how long it can stay in the supermarket. And if everything goes wrong, you have consumer protection to be like, hey, something along the line of all of this went wrong because I got a yogurt that is expired, that doesn't taste well, it's cost me some stomachache, whatever. So we need that. We basically need controls that are not only at the end or not only at the beginning. We need an ecosystem of oversight that ensures that any tech product begins to show its desirability for the world and its good input on the world and its ability to not cause harm at the very beginning, but also that we control that at different checkpoints. And then in the end, if something goes wrong, you still have consumer protection. But only with consumer protection, it's just too far. And we want to make sure that you buy good yogurts and that you access good social media. So it's like consumer protection is a failure of everything else. So I think that we need to push for the industry to develop those standards. Like it's just like if you get on a plane and the plane crashes, you get some kind of compensation. Well, yeah, but you're dead. It's like we want to make sure that the plane is going to be safe for you to fly. And it's great that if it crashes, you get compensation, but that's not how you solve problems. And that's not how you build trust. And I think that we need trust. And in democracy, that's what democracies are about, protecting people and building trust between us and everything around us. Like, Bailey, you're sitting on a chair. That chair has had to prove that it can hold the weight of a human, even though like the worst thing that could happen is that you fall off your chair and that's it. Like, you don't even need to have to go to the hospital. But still, the chair has had to prove that it's safe for human use. Social media, they don't have to do that. So your chair is more regulated than social media that take 80% of our time, that are consuming our brains, that are creating addiction. It's just crazy how much of a space of non-accountability we've allowed to tech, and that needs to stop.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So, Justin, I know that I saw you nodding along there quite a lot.
That was a symphony. I mean, it was like music to my ears, Gemma. I mean, and honestly, even the metaphor you used, the yogurt, I usually use a snack bar. If I decided I want to launch my snack bar tomorrow, there's no way that's going to happen. But if I know how to code and I've got access to a web server, I'm going to launch, Twitter 2.0. And I'll have some algorithms that will be, all fired up to get people stuck. It's absolutely right, absolutely horrendous, the situation that we find ourselves in. And I think the regulation is a big piece, is a huge piece, not the only piece, but it's a huge missing piece right now that we're hopefully going to move towards rapidly, because it's so obviously not there. I think, I think one of the things that often really, really troubles me is how easily children can access inappropriate content. So the age verification is laughable if you compare it to the checks and balances in the physical world. I mean, imagine a 7-year-old walking into an off license to buy, alcohol, but the idea that children can stumble across inappropriate content, can sign up for, social media when they shouldn't be able to sign up until they're 13. And there's lots and lots of research, studies that have documented, how many people are underage, and verifications are just non-existent. So, I mean, I think, and you can go on, there's lots and lots of examples of how it's essentially the Wild West. You know, it was a gold
Yeah.
rush. People can set up shops, and again, I'm really conscious to come back to a point that Marx made, which was, you know, this idea that there's a lot of good here. This is the tension that there is. You know, it's good for the economy. You know, there's so many educational benefits. There's so much good in all of this, and even down to the positive psychological element in terms of how you used it. It gives people a sense of social identity, gives some people a sense of meaning. So it's not the platforms or the technologies themselves, it's how we use them. There are ways in which we could use them that are hugely beneficial, that could, you know, kind of enhance our well-being, and there's ways we can use them that are detrimental to us. But this algorithmic piece and the lack of regulation kind of can nudge us in the direction of them being more harmful than they need to be. You know, there's definitely things we can do to help us help ourselves. And yeah, no, I think I'm totally in agreement with that idea of regulation that needs to happen, and in sophisticated ways. You know, not knee-jerk ways. We really need to think about how we can optimize this to maximize, you know, social good and benefits for humanity, but at the same time, the kind of Wild West gunslinger mentality that has to end ASAP.
You know, you're right. And what both of you are saying, it makes me, you know, our talk today is about empowering youth. So Yoelle and Maddie, we're going to come to you next, of course, because when all of us are fighting, all of us here, to make a better digital existence and therefore just human existence for us and for youth. And you're the ones that this lack of regulation is impacting. I'd say, you know, it impacts everybody, but it impacts youth in such a dramatic way just because of the developmental phases of life. And Yoelle, you're the one saying, hey, we're the ones becoming addicted and addicted earlier, and it's having an impact on us. And of course, today is how we empower youth to change. And you're one who has done just that with our subscription to addiction. So what motivated you to build this? And what challenges do you find as a young activist in this space?
Well, yeah, I mean, first of all, the conversation so far has been so interesting. I've been taking notes myself. So thank you, everyone else, for your contributions. I think from my perspective, what motivates me is really just my own problem. The problem that I've had, like, with my own phone. I think that's really, like, when it comes down to it, the fundamental reason why I'm doing this is because every day I work on this is another day that I feel that I'm more in control of this power imbalance. And so by speaking up and talking about it, I can actually figure out a way that I never have to get to the point where I feel out of control. I give always the example, and this is part of what I will show in my film, of with YouTube, it always started with just one video, but then it's 3 hours later and I feel absolutely out of control. And it's not even just, oh, you know, where'd my time go? It's more of just like this physical feeling of being stuck and completely out of control, and this mental inability to even take care of your basic needs. And I think that gets you to a really scary place, because you lose all sense of agency in your life in that moment. And then you think, okay, well, if you think of yourself as so high achieving, how do you keep getting to this point? And so I think that place for me motivated this entire story that I'm building now, this entire experience that I've gone on with digital well-being activism. And ultimately, I think that's also kind of like a biggest challenge I face, is like the imbalance, like how every day, whether it's going to be my struggle with my phone, or I feel lucky enough and inspired enough to be able to make progress on the phone. Because the biggest thing with the film is also realizing, how do I want to capture this experience, and I want to get it right. And so from the creative angle comes all the questions of, you know, avoiding perfectionism and trying, and because this is something I'm so passionate about and want to be so right, sometimes I get stuck and I don't even know what the right thing is to do. But I realize that striving for perfection obviously won't get you anywhere. And for me, just capturing it as authentically as I can is super important. And I think other challenges have just been making this film a reality. So this is like the first major project I've worked on ever. So that comes with its own challenges, learning how to do things that I've never done before. I'm a business major, literally. So everything that I've done film-wise has been just through my own self-education and practice. And so when it has come to making this film, it's been interesting to learn many new things, and through the potential and opportunities of the digital well-being movement, I've gotten to do some really fun things. For example, renting out a film studio to film an interview with one of our digital well-being activists, Lars. You might have come across her. She's the founder of Half the Story, and to do that, we had to rent a film studio, figure out a whole camera setup. We've just hired a professional cinematographer to capture the footage. So I honestly never thought in college that I would be able to do that. And so the fact that now our film quality is quite literally Netflix caliber with the cameras that we're using, it's just been insane the amount of progress that we've had. And I think all of the challenges that we have literally just been learning opportunities for me to say, okay, I don't know how to do this, but let's figure it out. And that has not been a lonely journey. That's been very helpful. Marx himself here on this call has been majorly helpful through this journey for me as well. And it's really just been an opportunity to talk to as many people that know things more than me and can get them on my team and learn from them. So it's been a blessing, and this really is my dream job. So I'm very lucky and grateful to do it.
Thanks, Yoelle. You know, you said one thing there, though, that really stuck out to me, which I don't know if it would work in every realm of activism, but you said, actually, just my own problem motivated me. And could you, if in the world of social media and big tech, we were trying to figure out what's a problem you have and that motivated everyone, I promise you there are a lot of commonalities that span most people, regardless of what they look like, how they vote. There's low-hanging fruit. And I have never met even one person that didn't have one problem with social media and big tech. And so like on to what Gemma and Justin were saying, if I said, you know, hey, should you be able to be allowed to false advertise? Should companies be able to false advertise? They say they connect people, but we've got study after study that says people feel lonely after using social media. That's false advertising. Most people would be saying, no, wait, that's not right. You can't have an economy with false advertising. And if that problem motivated everyone and it was their own issue and they saw how it affected them, maybe we'd see greater change. So I like that. I'm going to say, you know, in personal activism, what are your problems and to make action on it? And I think like with you and with Maddie yourself, you're a wonderful example of the kind of youth that all of us here, including yourself, would want to mobilize through the knowledge that we're discussing today, like the kind of know better and then do better because you know better. And you actually have. So can you tell us what motivated you to build NoSo November and what tactics you think would work to mobilize more youth to take action?
Definitely. That's an awesome question. And it really threw me into something I've been thinking about through this whole discussion. This has been so inspiring and awesome to hear everyone's perspective on these issues. So similar to Yoelle, I mean, at the root of it, I did start my organization because of my own personal problem too. And a lot of times I talk about that the loss that I experienced through high school of losing a lot of friends to suicide is why I got into this space and got into suicide prevention work and created my nonprofit, which is true. But at the end of the day, it was because of my own struggle. It was because of the grief that I was going through. But it was also because I've struggled with depression since early middle school. And I saw directly how social media played into that and how my addiction took me away from my life and how the addictive algorithms were influencing me on a daily basis from 6th grade on. And I didn't even know that that was happening behind the screen until I watched The Social Dilemma. So it's definitely a very personal experience that, like you said, Bailey, like we are all really going through it together. And I just wasn't aware of these issues until around 2020 when I really did a deep dive of research, learning about how the algorithm is designed to use our psychology against us. And it really made me feel disgusted and upset, and also was kind of an aha moment of like, oh, maybe this is why the people in my age group in my community are struggling so much more than other generations and why we're losing so many people. And so this was very motivating for me because I personally had so much grief that I was just like sitting in that I just didn't know what to do with. Like I was at a really low point in my life, someone who I had loved so deeply and cared about so deeply and was very worried about for a long time passed away, and I was just a wreck. And I was able to luckily utilize that really intense pain and turn it into positive energy to motivate me to make a change in this space. And I'm so grateful that I did that, because every day that I do this work and I talk to young people, I talk to high schoolers, and they tell me they're excited to try out a month-long detox. Like, I feel like I'm doing that work on behalf of those who I lost, and that they would be really proud and excited to see all that's actually changing. So that's definitely been a big motivating factor for me. And so something else I really wanted to touch on was that I always viewed kind of the space of digital well-being activism on like two planes. So like up here is all the awesome people like the Design It For Us coalition doing the legislative work to try to pressure and kind of have the social media companies change the way that they're profiting off of our attention. And that work has always been so inspiring to me, but I just don't understand the legal stuff, and I'm not super interested in that. So I'm down here on the bottom up portion. So I feel like we're attacking it at both angles, where I was like, okay, I want to empower young people. I want to have the young people take their power back over these platforms and figure out how I can motivate them to make those changes so that they aren't as affected negatively. And so that kind of motivation really was like, let's just get one person at a time to log off. Let's get one person at a time to see how their mental health can improve if they aren't being distracted by these platforms. And so what I've realized is that profit is truly the center of this problem. These social media companies are making billions and billions of dollars, and there's no oversight. Things are just crazy. And yet we haven't really gone anywhere. Like, there just hasn't, I mean, there's been some awesome advancements, and I feel like we're moving in the right direction, but the social media companies are trying like with every breath to keep their business model, because it's so insanely engaging and profitable. And like, from a business standpoint, cheers to them, but they're like fundamentally degrading societal systems. And it's really scary for young people like myself, seeing the younger generations being more and more like enthralled in it and suffering. So something I've seen is that with my detox movement, it's been more about like youth empowerment and trying to get people to log off for a month. But what I have kind of come to terms with is that if I can make No Social Media November big enough and spanning across the globe enough, this could actually be a form of a mass boycott that could actually put a dent in social media companies' profits. And so for me, I recognize that that's honestly one of the only ways that could motivate social media companies to want to change, is if youth, if us, the people who are, our attention is being bought and sold, if we say, hey, this is not serving us anymore, we don't want to see your ads and we don't enjoy being on your platform, so we're going to log off, that will decrease profits of these social media companies. And so like I said, if we get enough people to do this, like just on a standpoint of trying to take care of their own mental health, like this could be a motivating factor and kind of like something that would actually motivate social media companies to change. So that's kind of just been something that I've almost shifted my perspective on a little bit. I'm still very focused on like trying to motivate people at the ground level to try to take their power back from social media and see how it affects them. But I think that this could be a really cool opportunity and potential to work with all of the awesome people working on legislation to try to actually make a change in this space. So I'm very motivated to keep going. I'm very motivated by my personal story and all that I've gone through, all that my community and my friends have gone through. And so it's so awesome just to see like intergenerational leaders working on this problem together, and we're all coming at it from all these different angles, but we're all collectively making a change. And so it's very it makes me feel very empowered and lucky to be in this space.
Yeah. Do you know what, Maddie? Something you've said, it kind of makes me think of like what you're doing is we're saying we're not going to be a victim movement anymore. We're going to turn this into a consumer movement, and that's really empowering in a way to say, hey, wait a sec, how I spend my attention matters. And I don't want to live in all of the harm. None of us here do. We don't want to live in all of the harm that's been done to us or that we have been a side effect of. We want to say, wait a sec, I have some agency in this. And remembering that you are a consumer, I think actually is pretty powerful here. And Gemma, I can see you nodding along and smiling. What's going on there?
No, that I totally agree, and I love this idea of like top down and bottom up, and we need that. Like, regulators don't act unless there's pressure from the community, especially when there's like intense economic interests involved. So unless we have a lot of people from the bottom up requesting, requiring, demanding that things change, and even going to action, like, let's boycott these services, nothing's going to happen, unfortunately. So I think we have like two challenges. On the one hand, to make sure that people that feel badly treated by these systems find a voice and a space to express and to complain. But also we need to provide solutions. And so I guess like at Eticas, what we do is try to provide those solutions. I was talking about the ecosystem of oversight that we need for anything technical. Like when we audit systems, what we are basically saying is, if you had all those things, then your audit result would be positive. But because you didn't, there's several points where we could not let you pass the audit. So like through auditing, like through creating the mechanism that validates the oversight, we're actually designing what an oversight mechanism would look like. And that's what we're hoping and working with policymakers to pick up, but also with the industry, like the good players in the industry that want to do better. So let's build together ways to ensure that when you are going and buying or downloading an app, you can have some guarantee that that app or that system or that service has actually had to prove that it will not harm people. And it's not that different from clinical trials, for instance. Like, before we could vaccinate everyone at the global scale, vaccines had to prove that they were actually effective in curing COVID and that they would not cause more harm than good. If we hadn't gone through those clinical trials, people would have been vaccinated by vaccines that were not working well. So we need that kind of process of ensuring that whatever gets to us is safe. And we could only trust the vaccines because that happened. Like, I've been vaccinated 3 times. If those vaccines had not gone through clinical trials, there's no way I would have allowed for them to be used on me. So like, that's how you build trust. And that is really, really important. Again, as consumers, we want to trust the things that we buy. We go to the supermarket and we expect things to be in good condition and safe for consumption because that trust has been built. Unless we do that, what I anticipate is a crisis of trust with tech products, which I don't think is a desirable outcome. Like, I think tech has a lot of things to put on the table, but again, we're not saying no to tech. Like, I wouldn't say no to skyscraper. I just want skyscrapers that don't fall on people. I just want tech that proves that it doesn't cause harm. Like, we're not saying no to everything. We're saying yes to better tech because we deserve better tech, and because the only tech worth having is tech that actually respects our fundamental rights and doesn't cause harm.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Like you say, we're going to have a crisis of trust. And you're saying this alongside, which is a glaring red flag for me, Twitter or X and Meta firing 20,000, 40,000 trust and safety people. I mean, they're not all trust, but they really cleared out a lot of trust and safety folks from both companies. And you could argue that Twitter did it first, and Meta saw, guess what? There's no negative outcome to doing that. Oh, I don't have to keep these people. Regulators don't care if I keep trust and safety. Yeah, we're going to cut 20,000. So, and the other thing you said that really stands out to me is the clinical trials, because the way I started today was I had talked to someone yesterday, a young leader, that said, we've been experimented on our whole life. We've been doing the clinical trials, you could argue, and they were unsuspecting participants. And if this was any other world and we said, like, we're doing clinical trials and you don't know that it's happening. Oh, you've all frozen. Can you?
You are frozen. Yeah.
There we go. I noticed. Yeah. See, listen, people, listen. We start talking trust and safety and the big tech freezes me. Okay. This is a sign, but I was just saying though, that you could argue we've been doing clinical trials on people for a long time now, and they were unsuspecting participants. And we actually, guess what? We have the outcomes now. We know that it didn't go well for a lot of people, and it's still not going well. And so what would we do in a clinical trial? We would maybe try to improve the product so that it serves humans a little bit better now. Okay, before I go to a question specifically for Justin on your current research, like maybe doing some trials of your own over there, Marx, I saw you nodding a lot to that one. So what are you thinking on that?
I just really agree with the sentiment that we're having here. Yeah. No, I would just really agree. Yeah.
Okay.
I don't,
Cool. Just a
yeah.
cosign, no big deal.
Yeah.
So then, Justin, your team at the Sync Digital Wellbeing Research Institute in Saudi Arabia has been investing great resources into research in this area. And actually, the Sync Digital Wellbeing Summit was the first time that I had experienced kind of a lot of us, not all of us, but a lot of us in this space collected in one room, and the cross-cultural dialogue was rich, and it's often missing in this conversation. It's actually also where I met Dr. Gemma, coincidentally. So could you update us on your team's most recent findings and how it could be used to serve youth in the long run?
Okay, definitely. And I think, yeah, I also met Gemma in Dr. Gemma in the Sync Summit, and I think, yeah, it was fantastic to draw all of those people together. And as I mentioned, that was one of the primary goals. One of the reasons for Sync to be established is to kind of create that space. And we will be having the summit again in early in 2024, February probably. But yeah, the research, I've got two research projects that I would share. And I mean, the work streams at Sync are phenomenal. I'm part of the team, so there are other people leading other projects that could tell you in more detail about those. But the two that I've been quite close to and I'm really excited about from this year, one of them was a relatively small project, but it was an intervention. So a lot of the research in this space is kind of early days exploration, kind of this ideas of, are there correlations between social media use and depression? There's been a lot of kind of, if you like, research into, isn't there a link? And we know that there is for some people, and it's more complicated. There's a lot of nuance in there. There are ways in which we can use this technology that actually enhances well-being. That's another story. But the idea that there are definitely some people that the way in which they use this technology leads to problems. And as a point you made before, that these problems, pretty much everybody can point to one of these different problems and say, yeah, I experienced that to some extent. Whether that's social comparison, you look at people's gorgeous lifestyles and then you feel bad, or whether that's the sense of being a cyber neglect, I call it. You put out a kind of a comment into the world and nobody answers you back and you feel incredibly crushed and alone. Lots of people will experience these things to greater or lesser extent. This idea of feeling lonely or low, or the mood isn't right, and then reaching out to even email, social media, a game, and essentially as a way to chase away a negative emotional experience, this idea of experiential avoidance. And this is portable experiential avoidance. It moves around with us. So there's definitely, these, let's call them problematic uses. And how do you overcome that? So one of the research projects that we've been involved in is developing an intervention. It could be an intervention or a prevention. We're not trying to pathologize this, but this idea that people have acknowledged or accepted that, yeah, the way in which I use tech isn't always serving me. Yeah, it isn't always serving me well. I want to do something about it. So we developed something called a mindfulness-based digital well-being retreat. And we keep the numbers small. So the model is that it's a group-based intervention, 15 to 20 people, and we take them away. So we take them away, and there isn't a detox. So we're not saying to people, leave your phone alone, don't go on your phone. But the invitation is to try and experiment with different ways of being with it. And the idea here is that we're looking at, so this is about empowerment, personal empowerment. What do you want to do with your attention? When you pick up your phone, what is your intention? So this idea of being a little bit more self-aware about this technology use and creating a safe space for people to discuss that and to explore it 1 week long. And so this was for me, this is not the usual type of research I do because it was qualitative. But for me, it was powerful. So we interviewed the participants after they'd been on this week-long retreat, digital wellbeing retreat. And just those, for me personally, those interviews were so enriching. The things that, the exploration of why people came on the retreat. So these really rich descriptions of the types of challenges that people face, personal challenges, some of them very unique to the individual, but then also looking at how people sort of took away elements from the retreat and embedded it into their daily life post-retreat. So we interviewed people at the end of the retreat and then at 6 months, and we've written that up for to share that with a broader audience, and hopefully, we will continue refining, fine-tuning the intervention, sharing it with other people, so that we can do this. I think this bottom-up approach as well as that. I think that was beautiful. That idea that yes, this is a socio-ecological approach from the individual, the psychological empowerment, the individual empowerment, to regulation, to community activism, all of these different strands kind of coming together and the industry itself. I'm sure there are people inside the industry that aren't just about profit. So I think that's fantastic. I think, and I'm conscious of how long I've spoken, but just briefly, the other project that I'm really super excited about it's a project we did 2 years ago, which is the Global Digital Wellbeing Survey. So this is a huge survey over kind of 200 items on there, asking all kinds of questions about technology use, attitudes to technology. We measure loneliness, depression, anxiety, so a whole raft of questions. And I think what's really, really rich about this is its scope. So this is 35 nations, 1,000 people in each nation. So 35,000 people are being asked questions about these technologies and the attitudes towards them, how they're impacted, the attitudes about how their children and their children's development is being affected by these technologies. Should phones be allowed in schools? Hundreds of questions that, the AI debate, should we have a moratorium? These kinds of questions. So really, if you like, kind of tapping the public sentiment on many of these issues. And this is a piece of research that we have just completed for 2023. So we have the data right now, which as a researcher is a beautiful time for me. I'm kind of in the data now, kind of getting answers, top level answers to some of these questions. So that's,
I'm excited.
Well, the summit, we will talk about this at the summit. The summit will be wonderful. Framed to some extent around the findings of the digital wellbeing survey.
Well, that first one, I just, with the summit in general and also the research that you produce, I think what's important for people in the West is that where it came from too. It comes from an inherently global perspective that you don't get to see a lot when our regulations, our big tech, and our research is very Eurocentric, very Western, comes out of a lot of the US, UK, Australia. And even though that's the case, it actually still has an effect in every part of the world. So, I think that, getting the exposure of the international perspective of saying, hey, I know that this company's over there and you're regulating it, but we're living with the same results over here is kind of a really important part of this dialogue.
Well, it's a global problem, isn't it? And I think if you look at some of the platforms that kind of are in the spotlight, in the crosshairs for criticism at the moment, are platforms that come out of China. So the whole idea of the TikTok and some of the gaming platforms. So this is trying to ban a platform in one location is almost like, I don't know, I can't think of a good analogy, but it's not going to happen, is it? People can circumvent that. This is a global issue, and this will unite. This has to be a unified front on some of these challenges, definitely.
Yeah, that's
UN.
Right.
The UN is the place for this to be discussed.
Well, you know what? We could stop. We should stop there then, because here we are. Like we said, there's people here right now, but actually this is going to be a video and a recording that can live in any country and that can be listened to from here on out as the UN goes to share it. So if you are actually live here and you have a question, you can feel free to put it in the chat or in the Q&A function. And what I'm going to do is ask all of you for some action items while any of those come in. So if you're here and you have a question, you can put it in the chat or the Q&A function anonymously. And in the meantime, a lot of today is talking about what we know and helping youth turn it into action, you know? So I really want to end on like, what do we actually do with this information? To be fair, I am a big believer in collective action. And I know that a lot of us are here. And I also am a top-down, bottom-up kind of person. However, people actually watching this are probably watching this as an individual, most likely. People here right now are probably here as an individual. And so from your vantage point, what is the bottom-up individual action that we could take, that youth or anyone else watching today could take? And I encourage you to be very specific from your vantage point. So why don't we start with Maddie? Because I think yours is pretty tangible. Other people might need a minute to think.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, so I mean, my biggest call to action is to get involved with my movement, the No Social Media November Detox movement. So if you feel that social media negatively impacts you in any way, or even if it is a positive experience for you, disconnecting for a month, seeing how it affects you, seeing if you have that kind of addictive tendency to tap where the app used to live, and see if your brain is kind of withdrawing from that experience, and learning how to build a community in the real world, and really trying out new things when you're bored, embracing boredom. All of these things are so valuable. So if anyone wants to try to take the detox, it's really fun. It's really easy. Just sign up on my website. It's nosonovember.org. And you can just pledge to the challenge, and we'll send out newsletters throughout the month of November talking about different ways people can get involved, whether it's locally or virtually. And aside from that, if anyone wants to help on the back end, I'm still kind of looking for volunteers and team members, and trying to just kind of strategize and come up with ways to really mobilize this movement and work with more schools and universities. So all of these connections are very valuable to me, and I would love if youth and adults alike could participate in the detox movement.
Thanks, Maddie. Marx, how can people help? What lessons should we learn moving forward?
Yeah, my perspective is going to be a little bit radical. I always think the action that we can take is we have to return attention back to the individuals. I think on the path of digital well-being, on the path of well-being in general, individuals can do is to just step out away from, go back to in-person interactions, go back to talk to the media friend, go back to going outside, and all those things that engage your senses, all those things that when you step outside, there's so many research that suggested when we started interacting with the real world, there's the amount of engagements in our brain that's be able to stimulate our brain function in so many different ways is completely different from a phone. And I think that's really the core issue. And I think that's really what we're missing. I think the solution is very simple, is to just take 10 minutes, the time that you would have used on scrolling on TikTok, scrolling on YouTube, take that 10 minutes and use that, give up the phone and try something else. Not phone, iPad, Apple Watch, anything else, but use that 10 minutes to do something real. Yeah.
Cool. And I also happen to know Marx is very serious about this. He doesn't have social media. So, Yoelle, how can we help?
Yeah, I would say I think like a good balanced answer to Marx, definitely go outside, do all the things interacting with the real world, but at the same time, if you inevitably feel that you do want to go back to social media or whatever it is that your relationship is with technology, I would encourage you to be intentional with it. What helps me is journaling and writing down, why exactly am I using certain platforms and what do I want to get out of them? And ultimately also setting boundaries for yourself and saying, okay, well, I only want to spend this much time, or I only want to use this for this specific reason. Maybe on Instagram, like for example, a good reason now for me is like, I still don't have social media, but I still think like at one point it would be helpful maybe to get Twitter, because a lot of digital well-being activists are posting their latest happenings on Twitter, and it would be informative of the digital well-being movement and following that to keep up with that. So there is an interesting balance that you do have to strike to kind of keep in touch. And I think for me so far, I've been okay not really being on any platforms, but if it comes to the point where you do feel that it is important for you to be on these platforms, making sure you're setting those guardrails and saying, what do I want to use these platforms for? And that way, the inevitable sucking in quality that they have isn't as strong on you because you know exactly why you're there. And I think it also makes you feel like you're back in control, which is super important.
Thanks, Yoelle. We'll do Justin and then Gemma, and then we'll have one question in the chat for you. Justin, how can we help? What's one action?
One action. Don't give me just one. I had about 15 queued up. Yeah. Okay.
That's fair.
I've got to choose, I mean, I would totally echo everything that's been said. And I think if I was to summarize it in some ways, it's kind of experimenting, you know, the way in which we use this tech, like for us to be creative. Now, acknowledge that there's a problem, if there is, yeah, if you're aware of one for yourself, and then experiment with different ways of being with it, intentionality, asking the question, how does it serve me? So I definitely do think we can't put it all on regulation. I think there's something about, this is an opportunity for growth. It's a challenge. The tech is problematic, but it's an opportunity for us to grow, to learn how to better use our attention. I think that's the superpower now, is what you do with your attention. But if there's one action, so I was just repeating, I think, what other people said, but there's one thing that was in my mind there, and I thought it's the arts. Yeah, you know, we talked about the social dilemma. I mean, it was super watchable. It was really creative. It was well done. So I think the idea of documentaries, and I think there's I Am Ruth. You know, I think the art and the art scene will want to, you know, kind of get on board, songs, poems. So if anyone's listening to this who's a filmmaker, I know there's a filmmaker on our panel, filmmaker, writer, artist, poet, you know, channel, you have that's the most powerful. Stats and journal articles don't speak to people. Artists move people, and if we really want to move people in the right direction, it's our artists. We need our artists to be hearing this. So I would say
I love that.
One thing. Yeah.
I see Maddie loves it too, but I love that too. And I think all of us are, you know, we have a lot going on our LinkedIns and bios, but actually I know all of us here are driven by art as well and believe that it can change the world. So I mean that lightly. Gemma.
I'd say do something, anything. But just
literally anything.
Yes, literally anything. But just know that it'll be easier if you team up with others. Like, I think one of the great things about even today's presentations is that even when you have like this individual drive, things happen when you get together with others, and when you get, you know, your abilities and your understanding and your capacities together with those of others, and then you can do amazing things. So get together with others, join the projects of others, build your own project, but invite others. So let's create that collective action that can bring about change. But I would also say, realize that the fact that you have to defend yourself is really unfair. Like, again, following on examples, like when you go to the supermarket, you don't have to be a nutritionist to be confident that you're buying things that are safe for consumption.
Preach.
When you go to the pharmacy, you don't have to be a chemist to know that what you're being sold is good for whatever illness you have. Like, you know, under democracy, things around us have been prepared so that they don't harm us. And we are not asked individually to take actions to protect ourselves. There's things out there that protect us. There's seatbelts in cars, there's zebra crossings, there are certifications for things, for chairs, for buildings, for everything. So the fact that we have to take matters into our own hands is really, really unfair. Also because our tax money is paying for people to do exactly this. Like, you know, there's a profession called politician that is supposed to create all this ecosystem of governance and controls and oversight. So I would say also demand that those people do their jobs and vote along the belief that tech needs to be better and do better. So, you know, yes, do something, anything, get together with others, but also realize that this is really, really, really unfair. We should not be the ones protecting ourselves. There's a society out there, there's rules out there. We should be protected by those.
And, you know, what Gemma's saying about this is the top-down approach. So if yes, we can act as individuals, and we all are, we wouldn't be here today, but there is group action that's needed, right? And this means when the votes come, if you're living in a democracy and you're watching this right now and you do get the privilege of voting, like, this matters. When big tech is on the agenda or a new bill is coming through to regulate it, remember that there's going to be a faction that's trying to make you think that it's just about free speech. I want you to remember us in your ears, that there's also about safety and health and well-being of humanity. So here's what we're going to do. There's a couple of questions in the chat, and I just want you to, like, for my speakers here, you can either come off mute or you can virtually give me some kind of thumbs up that you've got some insight here. The first one is from Ella Bates. I'd love to hear some thoughts or tips on how corporations can help their team members from well-being perspective with digital well-being, which so we're working now. Now this whole world of digital well-being is absolutely intertwined with the world of work. So that's interesting. Anyone have thoughts on that?
I didn't fully capture that. Is that digital well-being in the workplace or somebody who works in a tech company?
Digital well-being, I'm going to guess digital well-being in the workplace. And how can corporations actually help their team members? So let's assume that, I mean, I myself am a CEO of a company, as is, Gemma. So how can we help our employees with their digital well-being, whether it's what we do or not? We know that we have them in virtual spaces. We know that they're hybrid. We know that we're expecting them to live in virtual spaces. So what do they do?
I will say a couple of words on this because I'm conscious. I can see Dr. Gemma is locked and loaded and ready. Yeah, you're ready to go. But I think because this is something we have lived within several organisations that I've been in, and I think that often you'll find there are digital wellbeing programs, like there are wellbeing programs, and you can have things like, I mean, really good organisations might have things like shut the mail servers down on the weekend, so you're protected from overwork. It's not always possible and not possible for all employees. But I think if you're really serious about it, then you can manage the way in which email is set up. And I think the other thing, though, and this is a piece that gets missed, with well-being in general in a lot of organizations, it's often rolled out to the plebs. It's rolled out to the little people, and the big boss, the CEOs, the top team, they don't get involved. And they really, if you really say the top team are explicitly and implicitly the leaders, and they need to embody these things. They need to be the person that isn't on their phone in the meeting when someone's talking. That they can model what it means to give full attention, to give someone undivided attention, to build that person's confidence, rather than the split attention but obviously busy people sometimes have to do that. But I think for me that's one of the keys here. But whatever techniques are used, really piece that gets missed is that often it's technology over their coffee machine. It's often the leadership, the senior leadership, the really busy people who are too busy for this, and they just kind of roll it out in it trivializes it, it undermines it to some extent. So that would be my one piece of advice on workplace, corporate well-being, digital well-being.
Yeah, and you're right. They think about it as like, oh, here's a new tool maybe to boost productivity, but not balance it with the human side of the outcomes that come with it. And I know that this question is for everyone here. So one thing that I could be a proponent of as well is onboarding in general. If you work at a company, should include all aspects of the human self. I'm a bit biased. I own a soft skills development company. So I think it should include those skills that make a functioning human so that I can have a well and functioning employee. And now that includes digital well-being, straight up. If I expect you to be in hybrid, if I expect you to be working in hybrid or remote settings for the majority of your time, in every room I've been in recently, it's not going back, it is majority hybrid, then I also have some responsibility to care for my employees in those spaces. Just as I think Gemma might allude to in some way, if you come into my workplace, I got to make sure the lights aren't falling on you in my skyscraper. So Gemma, what do you got to say to that one?
No, actually, I was going to say that, Bailey, I think you're the best person to address this question, because I know you've been doing a lot of speaking in corporate settings, so you probably have like a more of a general perspective. I can say like the little things that we do ourselves, like we don't use any software that requires an app. So that's a way of not using like your personal devices or devices that are always with you. So everything needs to be in a computer that you can close once your day is finished. But also very intentional in telling people, you know, because we are fully remote and we work across time frames, and time zones, you will receive messages outside of your work hours. There's no expectation for you to answer those, and not just not an expectation, like you should not. So just be very intentional in saying this and ensure that middle management respects that, because oftentimes, you know, leadership is like, oh, we're so respectful of everything, but then middle management, they're the first ones to create like, you know, additional WhatsApp groups, and it's like, no, that's wrong. Always use the corporate means. Always make sure that they're computer based and not in your personal devices or even corporate devices if it's a mobile phone, because you carry it with you all the time. And just be super intentional about respecting your working hours and never expecting anyone to work outside of those.
Cool. So this is the absolute last question, folks, and I'm actually going to change it up a little and throw it to Yoelle, Maddie, and Marx. I know you work with some young folks too, but Mark is also a co-convenor, so we're really trying to hear from the rest of us, right? And then we're going to end. So we've probably got max 10 minutes more now. The question is from Debbie. It says, how can more parents be reached to prevent them from introducing their children to this harmful entertainment at such a young age because they are too distracted to notice? Also, Debbie says she has never watched a more informative panel. So I was thinking it would be interesting to actually put this to Maddie and Yoelle, because you're the one, I think, who has most recently lived with parents who were maybe trying to entertain you. And I would just love to know what you think about how other children's lives could be improved. So why don't we start with Yoelle?
Yeah, it's certainly an interesting question. I think the biggest concern around this is like this whole concept of screenagers, right? I think the original narrative around it was that it was a holistically problem of the child, that they are so screen obsessed. Why are they doing this? It's their fault, this, that. When I think more than ever, people are realizing that everyone is screen obsessed, and the parent might be setting the wrong example for their child if, you know, they're pacifying their own emotions with the screen. And I think what I've realized myself is the reason that I've come to my phone is because it was me trying to get away from some uncomfortable emotion, whether it be anxiety or stress or whatever it may be. And I think the harm down the line comes when, you know, a child is given a phone at a very young age, and, you know, the whales that they had and pacify with a phone when they're a toddler all of a sudden become deep-rooted mental health problems that are not dealt with when they're older. And you have this inability to cope with your negative emotions. And I think that's the biggest problem that we're seeing now when it comes to the problems around mental health. In terms of what a parent can do, I think obviously the first step is setting an example, figuring out what your own digital habits are, and seeing what kind of example, just as in any other problem or experience, you'd want to set for your kid. And I think there's also plenty of organizations out there that are geared exactly to help parents. One that comes to mind is, I think it's called Fair Play Screen Time Action Network. They're essentially an organization that is designed around enriching parents and giving them toolkits to help navigate teaching their children about existing online. So I think there's a lot of things that they can do, but it's also really comes from the parent themselves and figuring out what they want their own digital lives to look like, and then we'll see what happens next.
Thanks, Yoelle. Maddie, end us off here. How can parents be reached? If not by hearing just from young people in general.
Right, definitely. I mean, I actually have a personal story. Like, I have a mutual friend who had a baby. She's like 19, so she's kind of like a teen mom. And it really scares me because she's still in her party phase of vaping and drinking, and she's obsessed with TikTok. And I see those habits that the mother has coming into the child's life, and I see the child posing. She's like 1 year old. The child poses when she knows her mom is taking a Snapchat video of her, and she picks up her mom's vape and acts like she's hitting it because she sees her mom doing it. And so it's all of these comments about modeling. It's so important for and especially because our generations are getting younger and younger and younger who are having these children. Like we were like my age group, I know people who are having kids now too, and I'm 22. And personally, that's not something I'm interested in anytime soon, but I know people who are having kids, and we were the generation who were experimented on and were kind of the guinea pigs and are typically very addicted to these platforms. And so when we have children, we're completely inflicting that on them and showing them that that's normal and that's right and that's the way that we should live our lives. And so it's really difficult, and it's frankly scares the crap out of me knowing that the younger and younger our generations are getting that are having kids, like that it's just not moving in a positive direction. So I couldn't agree more that education, I think, is the most crucial step. I've actually had some conversations with some parent coaches who work with special needs children on creating a curriculum, not only for what I do already, which is working with middle schoolers, high schoolers, and college students, but the parents of those students, and teaching them, hey, this is the new development. Snapchat has an AI feature. Do you know what that means? Do you know how your kid can use that? I'm sure probably that most parents don't actually get that or even know that that's a thing going on. So having up-to-date information, like with Fair Play, like I want to look into that, because like I said, I was thinking of developing my own educational curriculum for parents around that. But yeah, just being aware of how you use your technology and around your children, and just educating yourself. It's really hard, but I think it's very necessary for the next generations to be able to thrive and not be subject to the same harms that we experience, if not worse harms. So yeah, I'm fearful, but I'm also hopeful, because like we've talked about, there's so many amazing activists and people working so hard to combat these problems, and we're moving in the right direction. So yeah, I'm thankful for everyone here. I'm excited to see where this all leads, and there's a lot of problems going on, but we're all working really hard to solve them. So thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Maddie. And actually, I think that's the perfect way to end, because you talked about role modeling. And I think everyone here who has shown up to empowering youth as change makers for digital well-being, and to either showing up or actually more likely viewing this afterwards, you've been part of this discussion on emerging technology and social media use. And in my mind, and I know the minds of the rest of the speakers, you have done your first job of role modeling. So now what are you going to do now that you know? This is put on by the United Nations as part of the Science Summit. And in being here and in going out and talking about it, you are contributing to the Sustainable Development Goals, specifically Goal 3, which is centered on good health and well-being, Goal 4, which targets quality education, and our conversations align with the UN Global Digital Compact and Local 2030 initiatives that aim to make technology ethical, inclusive, and community-driven. So you've taken step 1 in all of these goals today. Now, what are you going to do with it now that you are a bit more empowered with the education? Thank you for coming. Thank you for the questions, and thank you for viewing later. I'll see y'all on the other side, hopefully.